Who first shared their stories in caves? Connected art, nature, and science. Led us toward new horizons. Who thought to capture motion? Spark an engine to life. Turn television into a playground. Every day, you create the playful, the functional, and the unexpected. You break down walls and take us to astonishing places. Tell stories, leap borders, and create beauty for tomorrow. Because at Unity, we believe the world is a better place with more creators in it, where everyone has a chance to shape the world.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second session of our 2022 webinar series, coming to you live this week from Singapore with Sarah and Jenny, part of my team. I'm coming to you from Brisbane, Australia, and we have Aniruddha, who is our main presenter today, coming to you from India. We cover a pretty diverse market, so we have an audience from India, Greater India, right through to New Zealand. Great to have you all on board today. Just a few tips and codes of conduct we'd like everyone to take note of today in the webinar. Please do not use the chat for questions. All questions should go into the Q&A panel. If you're joining us on Zoom, if you're joining us on YouTube, please put those in the comments section and we will relay those to Aniruddha throughout the course of the session. We don't use the raise hand function, so please don't do so in Zoom. Unity technology is at the forefront of digital transformation in many different industries. And whilst some of you may be very aware of that 70% of the top 1,000 games are driven by Unity engine on the gaming side, Unity is being used in many industries across the globe, from architecture, engineering, construction, through to car manufacturers. It's being used for maintenance, using AR with companies like Boeing, education, film and animation. And that means that there's a great pathway to develop to become a Unity certified professional. Next slide, thanks, Sarah. Various levels of certification, all the way up to being a certified instructor, where you're able to instruct and conduct education for Unity users in studios and industry alike. Just a few recent developments in the Unity ecosystem. In the last several months, we've had a couple of amazing additions to the Unity family. Wedded Digital, who are the New Zealand-based studio who've designed tools for many of the big hit movies in the last decade or so, and most recently for Doctor Strange movie, all the way back to Lord of the Rings, etc. And just in the last couple of weeks, Zebra have joined us, and they have state-of-the-art biomechanical simulated virtual humans powered by AI and machine learning. Over time, these will be developed, will be rolled out into the Unity ecosystem, so that these tools are democratized for the greater good of all of our community. And just a reminder, if you're joining us today, not on Zoom, if you're joining us from any of these other channels, please use the ScanMe code now if you would like to qualify for our weekly swag pack giveaway. We'll leave this slide on here for a couple of seconds for you to get your camera phone out. If you want to qualify for this, you will need to register and register on this form. And at the very end, we will give you a link for the survey form. If you are the lucky winner and you've registered, we will be in contact with you via email. And some of our past winners, so most recently, from some of our other sessions, have received their swag packs, and they've sent us some great photos. So it's awesome to see you guys wearing that. Thank you for sending in the pics. So we're in week 2 of February. Today's presentation from Ani will be on Unity ArtEngine. Next week, we have more of an industrial focused webinar, and that's how to use CAD and building data using Pixies, bringing that into Unity. So if you're have an interest in the architecture, engineering, construction space, and 3D modeling, that's a great webinar for you to join. And we have an introduction to editor scripting the week after that. And Annie, thank you for staying by through my introduction. Great to have you on board today. Today is a live session. We have recently been doing pre-recorded sessions the night before to optimize quality, but we have a full live session today from Annie. So over to you, Annie.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Good morning for the folks joining from all over CPAC. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let's see if we can do that. All right. Andy, is my screen visible?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody to the webinar on ArtEngine today. We have done in the past a webinar on ArtEngine before, but since then there have been some additions and some new features added to the ArtEngine software. So we thought it's a good idea to have a refresher webinar on ArtEngine around this time of the year. So let's get into it right off. So what are we going to be talking about today? So first of all, I'm going to be giving you sort of an overview and an update on what ArtEngine is currently doing, where the current feature set is at. We're going to be taking a look at some of the example-based workflows and what ArtEngine is capable of doing. You're going to be looking at some of the up-res capabilities and remaster capabilities of ArtEngine. We're going to talk a little bit about the automation and batch processing that comes with the studio license of ArtEngine. And then we are going to look at a customer testimonial. And after that, we're going to go into a demonstration of the ArtEngine software itself. Once the demo is through, we'll be going into question and answers. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A while we are going through the webinar. If something is sort of more relevant and something that we can take in the flow, I'll take those questions in the flow of the webinar, or we can then have the questions answered towards the end of the demonstration. And now let's begin. So at Unity, we have a saying that the world is a better place with more creators in it. So when we say that, we really do mean it. And as such, we are always looking for tools. We are always looking for features or technology that can really empower anyone to be a creator using Unity. So ArtEngine is one of those tools where you can bring your own imagination close to what you're making, right? Or rather, what you're making close to your imagination, where it really enhances the quality of the artwork that you will create, or the 3D models that you will create, the materials specifically that you will create as a 3D artist. And as such, ArtEngine strives to be a tool that brings very high-end and advanced image processing capability to literally at the fingertips of anyone who wants to use it. So ArtEngine is AI powered, and it helps in 3 areas. It simplifies the process with a low barrier and a very shallow learning curve, right? It automates by removing the painful or time-consuming or repetitive tasks for artists. And then it accelerates the creation of realistic materials and environments from photos and scans. So how does this work? So this is based on the example-based workflow, right? So we start with some seed data. So we could get it from anywhere. So if we could get it from something like, searching the internet, You could scan a few pictures yourself. You could take some pictures of your phone. In fact, in the demonstration later today, I'm going to show you a mix of exactly that. We're going to take a look at some of the pictures I've clicked off my phone, some of the pictures I've taken from the internet, and some just, random pattern designs or something like that, right? Then it takes the seed data, runs it through the ArtEngine, process, and then it automates by enhancing it or expanding it or even transmuting it into something completely different, right? And you can iteratively do this process, right? So you are going to see a lot of reuse of materials. You're going to make maybe 10 different variants from a single photograph of a texture, and then use those 10 variants to make something else entirely, right? So the three AI components of ArtEngine are as follows. Like the first is um, this is specific to the automation, obviously. So the first is where we enhance, where an asset looks bad by itself, you want to improve it in some way, right? Then we expand, right? When you need more of an asset, right? So if you have a ground texture photograph or sort of a hand painted ground texture, right? And you want to create more of those, but you can't keep your artist busy just drawing ground textures, right? So what you can do is you can take ArtEngine and make infinite variants of it, and then we transmute things, right? So when something is not exactly as you imagine, for example, if you're looking at, you've taken a picture of some leaves or foliage, right? But it's not exactly how you want it. So what we do is we transmute it. We change it into something that suits our requirement a little bit more, our imagination or our creative direction a little bit more. So what can ArtEngine do? So ArtEngine can create tileable PBR materials from a single image. So that means you can create a full material set by inputting just a single image or just a simple photograph. So that then takes it to a shading through a shading algorithm. It takes it through all sorts of channel generation. Like you generate things like normal maps, you generate things like roughness maps, albedo maps, and you have a seamless PBR material generated from just simple photos. So on the screen, if you can see, on the left side, you are going to see some of the pictures that were grabbed from literally Google Images, right? And the PBR materials on the right that you are seeing are made from those four images just by running them through ArtEngine. So anytime you take images from the real world, they're not necessarily tileable, right? Unless you really, are really careful with taking a picture of a repeating pattern on a tile floor, you're very unlikely to find something that is, naturally tiling when you take a picture, right? ArtEngine can help you. So when you take a photograph of say something interesting, something that you would like to use as a texture in your game or in your project anywhere, right? Suppose you take a picture of a wall that you find interesting, but the wall is all sorts of covered in dirt. It's not even. It's not like tiling. You can't just put that texture on every wall in your game without making it tileable. So ArtEngine can help you with that, where it can create seamless styled images at world scale. You can generate PVR maps from a single albedo image, right? An albedo image is essentially the color information of the surface of the material, and then PBR, which is physically based rendering, will also need other kinds of images, such as a normal map, a metallic map, a roughness map, and sometimes even an ambient occlusion map, right? So you could create all these four different kinds of map just by having that albedo image. That albedo image can be basically the photograph we took earlier and then made tileable. All ArtEngine has to do is just take that albedo image, run it through some AI, and then you're going to get these four different channels without having to do any of the intrinsic or complicated artistry that you would normally have to do through something like Photoshop or something like Krita or any other image processing application, right? Then ArtEngine can create seamless materials. So, and that is like sort of an understatement. You can create a material right from 1K to 32K inside. So even if you're using ArtEngine for games, or you might be using it for something like movies, material generation across all texture maps will be seamless and automated. So anytime you take any image from the real world, you can rest assured that ArtEngine can, take that image, make it into a physically based material, and then make many more variants of it very easily. So it's going to be literally as simple as just taking a picture of something that you liked on your phone, come home when you're done, come to the office when you're done taking pictures, run it through ArtEngine. You have that substance, you have that material made in 3D, reproduced in 3D through physically based rendering and through ArtEngine AI process. And then you can also build upon it and make variations of it as well that you could not find in the real world. So ArtEngine is more than just an image processor that can create just textures and materials, right? ArtEngine can also help in photogrammetry applications. So it can take a surface scan like this after reconstruction, and then it can process the tileable material and all the additional maps, like the ones we talked about, like roughness and ambient occlusion, detail normals, and it can just generate a texture based on a scanned 3D surface. So it can be very useful. You're creating assets for games, you're creating rough edges to make sure that when we transmute a texture or when we make variants of it, you're focusing on the right areas. And then we have nodes to create more material variants of the same image. So if you have one sort of point cloud in uh, of a surface, then you can run that through ArtEngine and then make many more variants of it as well, right? Then there is something sort of new that has been added since the last time we had this webinar. So what you can do is you can use about 8 to 16 images to process albedo information and normal information. And you can also, calibrate ArtEngine to a rig that take this kind of photometric scans, right? Um, what this essentially does is takes scans or photographs from 8 different light angles, and then we combine those using the multi-angle to texture node. This essentially sort of recreates something very similar to a photogrammetry scan. It's not based on the usual structure from motion algorithm, but this is more calculated or computed with the different sorts of lighting that angles that are present in those 8 images. And then the result is a material like this, where you can just, you have 8 pictures of a surface where you have just, 8 different light positions where the light shines on that surface. You run that through ArtEngine through the MATT matte node, and then it gives you a better fidelity in the surface details like that. So one more benefit of ArtEngine is that you can use your purchased or existing content, such as all your CC0 textures, all the textures for the models that you've purchased on something like TurboSquid or downloaded from Sketchfab. You can use things like Quixel Megascans and use those textures, and you can create more variants of them just by running them through ArtEngine. You can just take up just about anything that you own currently and make a variant of it. Next up is what ArtEngine can do for touching up your images or touching up your textures, right? So if you have some details, some unwanted details in your existing content, then ArtEngine can give you the tools to modify the full material, not just a single image, but the full material set of that asset, where it looks great, but sometimes you don't want that many, like over too many details or blemishes or something like that. So when somebody says, say, suppose your art director says that, hey, I really like this rock, but this has this big dent on it. Can you somehow remove that dent? Now, typically, for an artist, this is sort of a nightmare picture, right? This is going to require a lot of painting over in all the material channels. You want to have, first of all, have to remove that in the albedo, then you have to make sure also removed in the normal map, then you have to run through the roughness map. ArtEngine can just sort of paint over that dent, and then just create a more cleaner or more uniform variant just by running it through some nodes. So what you would do is you just paint a mask, mutate it, and then you have a seamless retile texture in literally seconds. Then you can take any size of image and then make it into a power of two scaled image. So as you might already know, whenever we are using any sorts of textures in computer graphics in general, it's always a good idea to have an image that's in the size of a factor of sorry, a power of 2, right? So that goes from the 8 by 8, 64 by 64, 128 by 128, 512 by 512, and so on and so forth. So having a power of 2 images is sometimes very important for uh, the the game that you are making. It will definitely have an impact on the performance. It will definitely have an impact on how different sorts of mip maps are calculated, and as such, it's critical to have power of 2 scaled images in all sorts of computer graphics applications, right? So when you want to make power of 2 images, you sometimes always don't always get your source image or your input image at a power of 2. So something like phone cameras or DSLR cameras are notorious for this. They are photography devices. They're not. They don't really come with like a square image aspect ratio, right? And they have you know you can crop it, but then again we come back to the same problem of we have to get rid of some of the detail after when we crop it, and then we are ignoring a significant chunk of the image when we crop it to a square aspect ratio, and then we have to still resize and things like that. So what ArtEngine can do is take any source image of any aspect ratio or any resolution and sort of generate a power of 2 image uh, from that input image. And it can take into account all the details that are present in the source image of an arbitrary aspect ratio, right? Then you can also use as ArtEngine for remastering the assets. So suppose you're using um, suppose you're upgrading an older game to a more modern platform. Suppose you're making redoing something that you made 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe even longer, and you you really see that you could have to sort of upgrade the quality of those materials so that it also looks good on newer devices, right? So uppressing with ArtEngine is a great use case. A lot of us have lots and lots of older artistic content that still looks great, but sort of looks pixelated or low quality, right? It needs to be remastered. So there are two modes in ArtEngine for remastering. So first is the cartoon mode or stylized content where you can take, hand painted textures and then uppress them into a more, look while still maintaining all those details. We have a photo mode for this. Update and recycle any sort of old or depreciated content and make it new again. You take low res images, you use the
Hi, folks. We seem to have lost Ani
so
there for a
here's
second.
this is simple uppress and
Sorry, Ani, do you just want to log back in? Sorry, folks. We apologize.
sorry about that, guys. It seems my Zoom crashed. I think am I audible and is my screen visible again?
You're back again.
Okay. So I'm just going to step back a little bit in the interest of anything that I might have missed out. So as I was showing earlier, um, here's the difference between what a simple uppress or a scale up looks like, and here's what comes out of ArtEngine, right? On the left, you see this image, which is fairly low in resolution. It is 512 by 512 pixels. It is low resolution even by sort of older standards. Like there is very little detail in there. We see there is some sort of wooden texture, and then there are some nails driven into it, right? When we just scale it up, it doesn't really give us like a lot of information. This is just giving us a a very blurry and lossy kind of result, in which it doesn't really feel like wood. It just feels like you took a picture of a wooden surface or a surface with nails in it, on a printed it on a rubber band and stretched it, right? It looks very smooth and looks very uh, blobby, right? But when we run it through an art engine sort of imagines the detail that would be in such a surface, right? So the nails are sharper, the brush strokes on the texture are more, present, they are more evident. And then there are like, it feels like wood, it feels like a metallic nail, and not some sort of a, blobby mess of colors, right? So this is what ArtEngine can do to upgrade or sort of remaster your current or deprecated artwork or deprecated materials from your older assets. So ArtEngine also has a command line interface. You can easily integrate ArtEngine uh, to save time right into a project pipeline. So suppose when you want to process hundreds of images, you can't have somebody click on everything all the time, right? Suppose you have a huge library of scans or a huge library of materials to sort of clean up automatically, or you want to just like we were talking about earlier, just remaster an entire library of materials. What you would want to do is just start the process and let it take care of itself. So ArtEngine also comes with a command line interface where you can integrate it into your production pipeline using command line tools like the command prompt, right? This is scriptable using either XML and C#, and it can easily integrate into your production pipeline very directly because it doesn't have any specific dependency on a specific software. All you need is your input library, and then you can just run that through ArtEngine. So here's probably a familiar name for a lot of you, Insomniac Games, right? So Insomniac Games happen to use ArtEngine recently, right? So what did they use that for? So they introduced an ArtEngine based workflow. They were remastering old assets. They created variations or mutated pieces of endless sorts of materials. Uh, they use things like color transfers to blend two different materials together. And the command line integration is something that they used for the entirety of the project. Right? So right about now is the end of the presentation part of this webinar. And now what we are going to do is I'm going to jump over into ArtEngine, and then I'm sort of this demonstrate as well as walk you through some of this is that ArtEngine can do in the but I'm also going to show you something that wasn't there in the presentation. It's a little bit fresh, it's a little bit experimental, but also quite a bit exciting. So if we have any questions, let's take them in between. So let's see. We have a question that says, is high-level perspective for texture-based photogrammetry workflow? How can you manage or calculate the photos into a mesh? Do I have to do it manually or will the AI do it? So to create a mesh from a set of photographs, you would need a tool like either Agisoft or you would need a tool like Meshroom, right? You can look them up on Google, and that the images that Meshroom will create as textures for those point clouds, you can definitely run them through ArtEngine. So is there any device that is available for scanning objects in the real world? Yes, you can take pictures from your phone and run those pictures through Meshroom. So I'm going to leave the other questions towards the end because I see my team was answering those on the fly very quickly. So thanks for that, Ipe and Tech and everybody. So let's get into the demonstration bit. Can everybody see the ArtEngine interface, Andy?
Yep, I can indeed. Thanks, Honey.
Let me just see if I can make the text a little bit bigger so that everybody can see the the labels or everything that goes in there. So this what you see on the screen is ArtEngine. ArtEngine has like a very straightforward interface. First of all, you have the the regular toolbar where you can create a new project. You can open existing projects, save them, undo, redo, and then you have the brush tool for painting masks and the eraser tool for erasing them. Very straightforward. If you're familiar with image editing applications, then these are going to be very familiar to you. Over here, we have some an interface very similar to what Unity looks like. First, we have the library where the hierarchy would be, and here you can sort of filter out what you have imported in your asset in your project, right? So right now I have a bunch of images in my project that you can see, and we are going to go through all of these and see what all exciting stuff we can create with this. You can have things like 3D models, materials, and textures, or essentially bitmaps. You can have them sorted by name, by type, by the date they were modified on, and I think this UI scaling will be too big. And you can also search for any kind of material that you're specifically looking for by name or by some sort of tag, right? Below that, you have the node library or the template library. So here you're going to find different sorts of nodes that you will just take, sort of drag and drop on the right on the blackboard or sort of the working area. This is where you're going to have all your node groups set up. And then you're going to also import those images, then connect them to one another like this, and then you're going to see a result, right? Then above that, we have the 2D viewer, and then we have the 3D viewport. The 2D viewer is going to essentially show you a preview of the image that you're working with. So here is a picture that I just dragged and dropped from my library. This is literally a picture I took on my phone. It's from the terrace on my house, right? I just went to the terrace, whipped out my phone, uh, just grabbed a picture, took that picture here, and we're going to see what we're going to make with that, right? And I am now, putting that into the project view, connected to a blur node, and as soon as I double click on the blur node, it's going to give me a preview of the blur node. So you can see I can just ramp up the amount of blur. It will just quickly calculate the node, and I have a blurred image right here. I can always go back and double click on this image, and it will give me the original result. So you can see the workflow is non-destructive. It's very similar to how you would perceive layers in Photoshop, but instead of layers being linearly stacked vertically on top of each other, this is a more branched or more versatile flow of image processing, right? Then what else can you do? You can create groups of these nodes that you want to manipulate together and sort of save as a template if you want to. You can calculate all these nodes at once by pressing this button which says execute all nodes, or you can calculate a chain of these nodes up to a certain node by selecting it and then clicking on execute to selected node. Then for moving around and organization purposes, you can disable the grid or enable it. You can also turn snap on. If you turn snapping off, it's going to move like this. If you turn snapping on, it's going to snap to the grid and move in specific increments. You can also choose to frame all nodes that you have in the project by clicking on this frame all or fit graph to view a button, or you can come to one-to-one scale where everything is zoomed in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so that perhaps the text is a little bit more visible when we actually work with these nodes, right? And then you can just select more nodes like this and create a frame around them again for organizational purposes like this. And you can then have those frames in different colors. You can give them titles. You can collapse them like this and make your own sort of node, custom node, right? If you delete those frames, it's not going to exactly delete the nodes inside them. It will just delete the frame, and that ensures that you still have a non-destructive work. Over here in the 2D view, you're going to see what node you're previewing. You can also see whether you're looking at the input of it or the output of it. So if we go and take a look at this blur node, where did that go? Over here. So you'll see that there are two little sockets on each side of the node. So data goes in, data comes out from over here. Data goes in from the input image, data comes out to go into some other node, right? So this is the input of the node and this is the output of the node. So in the 2D view, you can see what is the current input in that node, as well as what was processed and what came out of that node. All right, then what else do we have? So we can also isolate the red, green, blue channels. We can have the histogram visible. We can have the display. We can show the colors in sRGB space. You can also, if you are looking at a material, you're going to also see things like different channels of that material, such as the diffuse map, the normal map, and everything like that. So there's a question that, so how does ArtEngine work better than Substance Sampler or Designer? So ArtEngine is meant to be a product that's sort of complementing substance sampler or design, right? If you want to more parallel comparison to ArtEngine, it's going to be actually the Substance Alchemist is more of a direct comparison to ArtEngine, right? So it's not a replacement for Substance Sampler or Designer. Rather, it's going to be one of those tools that you will use to create materials for Substance Sampler and Designer. And as such, we are not going to get into a direct comparison of how it works better into than sampler or designer. A more apt comparison would be actually Substance Alchemist, right? Let's move on to the 3D viewport. Oh, just before I forget, over here you can also see things like the image resolution, the cursor position in that image, so that you have you've got pixel precision in when you're making selections or painting masks. Then over here in the 3D view, you're going to see things like, again, the same input output of the node that you selected, the name of the node that you selected, and few good things like being able to control the lighting on these 3D models. You're seeing a preview of the material or of the node on the 3D model or a 3D object over here. As such, it being 3D, you're going to have some sort of lighting in the 3D viewport. You can control that lighting. ArtEngine ships with a bunch of pre-existing lighting scenarios or HDRI files, and you can obviously load your own HDRI files and just have any kind of lighting in here that you like. Then there is also a viewport light that you can enable or disable, and that can be either a directional light or it can be a simple point light. You can change the color of the light to something else that you like, such as red. So as you can see, the top just went red. So I'm going to switch that back to something more normal, and you can color set the light intensity to something you like. You can have some camera settings where the camera is orthographic or perspective, very familiar to 3D artists. You can set the camera to a specific view, and you can change the FOV, and you can even lock the camera to something that you want to fix it at. You can load any kind of model that you want. So I'm just going to load my favorite one. So here it is from the, I should have that model over here. So what I can do is I can just drag that model into the 3D viewport like this, and it should ideally load that. There it is. Everybody's favorite model from Blender, the Suzanne the monkey model, right? And then you have some additional features for like tessellation, how the kind of surface details of the material that you see, the subdivision, and how effective are the smoothness, the roughness, and all the things that you are looking at, right? On the right hand side, we have the tool options. So if we have your painting brushes or masks, you're going to see those over here. And then lastly, when you select a node, you're also going to see its property, and you're going to be able to make changes to the parameters of those properties, right? So let's actually get into the meaty bit of this presentation, right? What I'm going to do is let's look at this first one. Let's look at the most simplest one first, right? So this is an image, I think, off of the internet. I just googled up like stickers on walls, and I landed up in this image. I think from a CC0 image from Pixabay, right? This is a nice chaotic image. I like it a lot. I want to use it as a wall texture, or at least part of a wall texture in my game, right? And let me just quickly move that to something like a more decent one, right? You can see that as it is, it's not exactly tiled because there is a very clear seam over here, right? If you see it right about here, there is a very clear seam. It kind of passes as it's a very chaotic image, but I would like to have this as something like a texture that I can paint on the walls in my game, right? So what I can do is I can run this through a mutation mode. And then the mutation node is going to do a couple of things for me. I can use, this is input image, which is not a power of 2 image. It's 4608 by 3072 pixels tall and wide, right? So the mutation node is actually going to mutate the contents of this image and get me a tiled power of 2 image that I can use as a texture in my game. So I have already pre-calculated these nodes in the interest of time for this webinar. So I'm just going to double click on that and then show you what it looks like. So notice the seam over here behind the eye and this California and this these stickers over here. I'm just going to double click that. Now what has happened is it has changed actually. It has just taken the content of this image, mixed and matched it together. But now you won't be able to find a very clear seam because there isn't one. ArtEngine takes the interior details of these kind of images and then just mashes them up together in an intelligent or AI assisted fashion so that they still remain meaningful. That's not a a pixel soup as such, right? They're still meaningful. You can still see things like letters, stickers, whole stickers that still retain their identity, not just a mixture of colors. And at the same time, now it is 100% tileable because even if I scroll up and down, there is no specific seam. There are repeating patterns, but there is no specific seam, a very clear seam. And the best part is I can create as many variations of this as I want. So I just created one by running it through one mutation node. I add another mutation node and I double click on that. Here's another variation based on that. So what I did is I just changed my input parameter a little bit. I just used the same input resolution. So if you don't want to create a power of 2 image, that is also still possible. So this way, here's the input, here's the output. The input has very clear seams, like you can see 4 seams over here. The output is seamless and still retains all the image details from the input image. If you want to create additional image, all you need to do is just duplicate this node or drag and drop another mutation node by searching it here, putting it over here. You can even daisy chain these mutation nodes. So I can use the input of this mutation node and plug it output of this mutation node and plug it as the input of the next one. If I just click this execute to node button here, you're going to see that it's going to be that was generated by this mutation node. Then another that it's still remain and still have all the details that the input has. And you see the result right about now. Yeah, there we have it. So here is our input image. Here is the new texture image that was generated from it. So you can see we have two different 2K textures generated from the same image, but still vastly different. You could use these as two separate textures and things like that. Let's see what else this can do, right? So here is another picture that I took just off my phone, right? This is a wall that I found interesting as a texture somewhere on the street. I'm not kidding when I say that I took these pictures myself. So I have full confidence that you are not going to find these specific images like that. The point is you can take literally any image and even if you've taken it on a mobile phone. So this image that you're seeing here, I took on my OnePlus mobile phone, right? And it's got a fair amount of detail. It's got a nice wall texture. I just need to use this into my game as a wall. I really like the gray, grainy, gritty look of it. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to run it through ArtEngine and sort of adjust the brightness and contrast a little bit. So there is a levels node which works exactly like the levels filter in Photoshop. And then see, I already got the contrast down by clamping the brightness values to a certain range in the image, right? Now I'm going to take this levels node and then mutate it to the same mutation node that we looked at earlier. And the result is like, very, very clear. You can have a repeatable tiling material right here that was generated by a simple photograph from a phone. And it has all these nice details that came from the wall, but it's seamless, it's tiled, right? You can see there is no, seam in here, and it's perfectly tiled. And let's just have a comparison, right? Let's just, look at the input image. It has this degradation or this damage to the wall or these stains on the wall in a specific place, whereas the mutation takes care of that and distributes it uniformly across the generated texture. But what else can it do, right? So you can take the output of this mutation node and run it through a material generation node. So the material generation is going to create, PBR maps from a single image, which is essentially what we would call the albedo image, right? So we just took the color output of this mutation node and we plugged it into the material generation node, and let's see what happens, right? I need to be a little bit closer to the surface like this, and maybe let's use a different model so that we can have a better view of the, right? Right. So if I click on the material generation double click now, you can see that it suddenly came up with, all sorts of information like normals and roughness and things like that. Maybe a little bit of a zoomed in view would be better over here. And let's turn down the lighting a little bit. Just disable this light entirely. Yeah. So as you can see, this is what it looks like without PBR maps, and this is what it looks like, after we generated PBR maps with it. It suddenly has like more detail into the output, right? I can also take a look at which map I'm looking at. So let's see what the normal map looks like. So the normal maps looks great, but I didn't have this normal map with me before. All I had was this, simple image that I took off a phone, and now suddenly I have this normal version, normal information, which looks quite accurate, right? I can also, if I want to, just add more detail to it. So let's try adding some more fine detail to it, and let's see what happens. You can see that immediately over here it is, taking some effect. It's taking effect into how the normal is calculated, and immediately it is updating the preview as well for this, right? Similarly, you can take a look at the height map that you might sometimes use for tessellation and things like that, and the roughness map. Both of them are like, retaining the detail, and you didn't have to edit them separately. These were all calculated or generated with neural networks from a single image, just by analyzing and assessing that single image. So very, very quick to generate materials of a surface that you found interesting in the real world. Take a picture of it, put it, adjust the brightness and contrast, run it through mutation, and then make a material right of that out of that. But what about something that was not, a picture of something in the real world? It could be something like a design, right? So let's take a look at this, for example. Suppose you have this image that you are using as a background for your game, right? And your art director comes and says, hey, I don't like some of these fruit in there. So can you just make sure that all these fruit are the same fruit, or can you just get rid of the tomatoes? And then you are like, okay, I can take, I'll probably need to, paint over this bit, take cut this tomato out, put another fruit in its place and things like that. What ArtEngine can do is you just plug this image into the feature selector. And in the feature selector node, you can select areas of an image that you want to get rid of, right? Or areas of an image that you want to keep for that matter. So I want to get rid of these tomatoes, right? So what I've done is I've plugged it in the feature selector node and then selected all these tomatoes. If I want to select more features, I just have to click on that area. If I want to, like, increase the amount of areas that I can select, I can just add more granularity to this feature selector node, which is right over here. The output is essentially a mask, right? You can see the mask over here on the right hand side over here. And or if you can sort of if you're familiar with the idea of masks in Photoshop, this is exactly like that, right? And then there is a node called seam removal. So a seam removal node is still going to get you a power of 2 image or a custom resolution if you so want. And it's going to take into account what you want to ignore. So it can ignore these features, that tomatoes and strawberries, and then it can just run that, and there you have it. So you have a very quick output, and you didn't have to manually edit anything. This is the input. This is the output. Your art director is happy. Your your work is substantially faster, and you can create more variants of this. Like if you want to, for example, let's take a look at. We have a question also on the same lines where how does the feature selector node generate a mask, right? So it's pretty easy. So the feature selector node essentially takes a how should I explain this? A feature selector node takes the pixels in that image, right? It analyzes them for edges. It analyzes them for different colored areas, and then tries to segment that image based on that information, right? And then what happens is you can use that information. You can use that sort of that segregation or that segmentation of that image, and then you can select individual parts of that segregation. As you can see over here, you see wherever there is a little bit of a contrast between two regions, two distinct colors of present in the region. That's where it's going to intelligently assume some sort of a seam or some sort of a part or a segment of that image, and I can do all I have to do is just click on these segments to select them, just like that, and then shift click on them to deselect them. Sorry, alt click on them to deselect them, right? Based on which segments are selected, it will make that area of the image white, and based on the which areas are not selected, it's going to make them dark, right? We have a question where the oranges went, right? The oranges I haven't gone anywhere. It's just how I have the parameters of my texture are essentially focusing on the lemons. So the oranges haven't gone anywhere. You can, if I decide to keep the oranges, all I have to do is select these nodes and then deselect everything else, and the output image will keep the oranges as it goes, right? So going to delete that and move on to the next one. So we don't have to stop there. We also run this through a hue saturation node to sort of make a color variation of it. So I can just change the saturation from here, and I can take the same image and generate a different variation of it very, very quickly, just like that. I can also improve, add or remove the lightness of it, just like that. I can increase or reduce the saturation of it, and you can create some variations very, very quickly. The best part is you still have your original result. It's not sort of broken. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image, this design pattern, right? The first image that we saw, the wall that we saw, and I'm going to blend them all together, right? So what is happening is I'm blending two images together, right? This is the first one. This is the seamless one that we were trying to get. This is the second one, which is my wall. These are same as the original images. These are not seamless sections, and you don't need to worry about that now because we're going to do something different. And then I'm going to take this, use this design that we took. I'm going to reduce the saturation and essentially treat this one like a mask, right? I'm going to invert that mask, and I'm going to use this as sort of a blend between these. So it looks like this. Already, I have created something completely new based on what we were seeing. It is taking into account both these things. It's something that we would do in Photoshop. But what ArtEngine can do beyond that is take this and mutate it further into something like this. Now I have a tiled image, and I have used three completely indifferent, like different and unrelated materials to create something visually interesting. And this gives the artists in your team or the art directors in your team a huge boost to their experimentation ability because it comes at a very low cost of time. Let's take a more quicker look at some of the other features. So how can you use ArtEngine for cleanup? So let's take a look at this wall, right? Again, this is a CC0 image that I found of a Pixabay. You can see this is a nice wall. I like the texture of it. I want to isolate just the wall texture. I don't want all this, all these details like this teapot that's stuck in there, this graffiti, this, all the indentations and all that. I don't need that, but I really like the color of the wall. I really want that to be, what I need in my game, right? So same process, we run it first to the feature selector node. We select these features that we want to remove, right? So I'm removing this door frame, I'm removing all the graffiti over here. So in this case, there is not a lot of contrast in the empty parts of the image, right? So there it just tries to best guess its way into assigning some sort of a boundary, right? But it has given me enough information to exclude these things that I don't want in my image. And then I'm going to run that into a mutation node, and I'm going to, just I think this explains it a little better. The feature selector I'm going to use as a sort of ignore map for my mutation node. By that I mean the mutation node will not take these areas into account, which are selected through the feature selector node. The mutation itself gives me a very promising result, right? It's given me a very clean, or rather a very uniform wall texture based on what we had earlier on. It takes the parts of this image which are cleaner or without all these features, and then it gives us a more uniform, usable, tileable wall texture, right? But there are still some little bits of problems over here. First thing I can see is there is a little bit of blotch in brightness over here, and that comes through something like some when the AI calculates lighting, it's not all going to be 100% sure, and then it tries to match the input quality the best, but from a creative or aesthetic side, that's not sometimes what we want. So what you can do is you can run that through a gradient removal node, which will essentially make the whole image more uniform or more stabilized in terms of brightness, right? Then you can use that this same information to generate a normal map as well as a roughness map. You can use the output of this gradient removal node to generate an albedo, and you'll see why that makes a difference. So let's take a closer look. This mutation node has some lighting on it, right? Then we remove the gradient, the lighting is like more even, but even still, we have a little bit of a highlight on the top part of these cracks, right? When we run it through albedo generation, even that is going to be flattened out, right? Then you can run that through something like levels. So it brings out the color a little bit more. Take the normal map generated here, take the roughness map and take this levels map. And then you can compose all of that into a singular material that looks like this. You can see the quality of the material is substantially, usable. It's more than usable. It's a high quality material that I can use in any game or any project that was just generated off of a simple image that I picked up of Pixabay, right? The best part is I can take this material and mutate the entire material. I don't need to, separate the channels also. I can just take the output of this material and mutate it, and it's going to give me a, variation of material just like that. And let's take a look at that and move on to the next one. To take just about a few seconds, calculate this. Art and right about now we should be done. So let's see what this looks like. First, we have this material over here. And now we are going to have a mutated variation of it, right? So I'm going to just switch between these two. I have a different texture, right? You can see the preview on both sides. You can see what the original looks like. You can see what the new one looks like, right? It's more than just a copy paste or just simple scale up or rotating of the image, right? And it has taken into account all the three texture maps that I generated. I just took an entire material and made a variant of it with a single, with a couple of clicks. Added a node, calculated it, and I'm done. Imagine the kind of flexibility or the kind of speed of iteration this brings to your art team, right? Or to you as an artist, right? This is indispensable when you're creating different sorts of assets or different variants of the same assets for your game. You have one wall, that means you have 100 walls. You have one wooden surface, that means now you have 100 or more wooden surface, right? Let's just now, without getting into too many details, let's get into what else ArtEngine can do. So here is a similar example. This is a jute texture, right? This is like a very hard burlappy kind of cloth. I'm not going to go very deep into the whole node tree now. I'm just going to sort of walk you through it. First, we run that through automatic levelings. Then we remove the gradient in it. Then there is a node called pattern unwrap. This pattern unwrap is essentially going to look for a pattern in a specified area and then take that pattern. You can mutate it and you have a seamless jute texture right over here. You can then split that if you want into specific channels for more granular control, compose them into a material, and here is what the result looks like. The result is a very high quality, very believable jute material that then you can output as a material directly into Unity, right? I don't have Unity running on this system right now, but if you have a Unity project running, you could just output this material right when you're done into Unity by just clicking on by outputting it to this material. Just executing this node will take it to your Unity project just like that. All you need to do is just assign that path over here and you're done. Let's see what else we have. So here is another example of the feature selector. So I have this image where there is this nice lady who's very happy to see all these balloons. But my art director comes and tells me, I don't need that lady, I just need the balloons. Again, we run that through the feature selector. I select all the bits, all the image parts where I can see that lady, and then run that through mutation. Voila, I have an image with just the balloons. I can use gradient remover to flatten this little bit of brightness that was showing up in the center. And then that's it. I can use this as a background on my web page, as a background for my game, as a sort of texture on a piece of wrapping paper or gift paper and something like that. And it's pretty awesome. Like this is something that would take an artist literally an hour's worth of time to do by hand. And that's really what makes ArtEngine really, really powerful. The feature selector node can also be used on hand painted images like this one. So again, this image is from OpenGameArt. This is a very intricate image because it has like a fairly even amount of features. So it has partially it has grass, partially it has stone, and we can safely say it's like about 50-50, right? But the feature selector node can give you very tight control also based on how granular you want it to be. You can select each and every rock very, very quickly. Once you've done that, you don't have to sort of erase them by hand. Imagine the kind of time it will take if the artist director tells me, okay, I like this image, but I only like the grass of it. Can you get rid of all the stones? If this was not an image I had painted myself, I would have no access to the layers of that image. So that means I wouldn't be able to hide the stone layer very quickly. If this was coming from a legacy project or from the internet, like OpenGameArt, I'm not going to have access to the stones layer. I can't just disable a layer like that, right? This happens a lot when you're porting existing games into another platform. So the feature selector node to the rescue. We select the stones through the feature selector node. We run that through seam removal. Done. We have basically a seamless tiled image of just the grassy bits of that. And then we can even use that to generate a material based on that. That's it. It was as simple as that. It took just about a few minutes for us to, do what an artist would normally spend at least a couple of hours doing, right? Then we have the upscaling or the upraising of existing artwork, right? So here's one of those images. So these are, again, all these images you can find on OpenGameArt. This over here is sort of an inventory icon pack, right? It's fairly low resolution. It's pretty low resolution. Actually, it's 320 by 320. Like even by legacy standards, this is tiny. This is like going to be, you probably wouldn't be able to see these images on the modern mobile screen. As such, we want to make sure that we have, upscaled it or improved the quality of this, right? So first of all, this is a JPEG file. A JPEG file is going to have compression artifacts. So ArtEngine has a very useful node called JPEG artifact removal. I'm just going to double click on that to show you what that looks like. And you should see some changes right here. You see that the detail of this armor is substantially better once I've ran it through the JPEG artifact removal. Right? Similarly, you would be able to see similar effects in the chainmail. The chainmail has better contrast once I've removed the JPEG artifacts. And then I can take that and run it through an upres. And then suddenly, what was like a pixelated mess now has more detail. It has sharper edges. It has things like, more, it feels like leather. It feels like cloth. It takes into account what is the content of the image, runs it through a neural network, retains the lighting information, and adds more, imagines more detail to it and adds it to the image, right? So now, based off of a 320 by 320 image, now I have a 1280 by 1280 image. So that means I can have all these, every icon is now scaled up to essentially 256 by 256, where it was about 16 by 16 the 16 by 16 in the earlier image. Sorry, 64 by 64 in the earlier image, right? This is greatly going to reduce the time it takes for me to upgrade existing artwork when I'm porting my game to a newer platform. I didn't have to go through these individually. I just put them all into a single icon pack and then just ran that through ArtEngine. Immediately, I have like about uh, 24 icons upgraded at the click of a button. Right? Lastly, let's take a look at another example of the gradient removal and mask paint. So here I have a piece of wood, a photograph of a piece of wood, a lot of dirt, a lot of it's let's be honest, it's a poor quality photograph. I don't know what I was thinking when I took this, right? But ArtEngine can help me salvage this into a meaningful image, right? So I can run that through gradient removal. Immediately, you can see there is an improvement in the quality of the photograph. It takes into account the flash that was there. It takes into account, the different areas of the image. Then I'm going to paint over a mask like this, and then get rid of some of the blemishes. You can see even the mask is being previewed. The mask I can just take more, and like if you want to erase more of here, and I can do from here. Then I can run all of this through a mutation node over here. Immediately there is a seamless style texture. Same thing, albedo generation, normal map generation, roughness generation. Run that through levels. We have a wooden material, just like that. Very, very straightforward, very, very simple. The last thing I want to show is actually something that was added as an experimental feature in the recent version of ArtEngine, and it's called style transfer. So style transfer is actually pretty cool, and that's where the power of AI really shines. I'm going to be like very straightforward and say this is right now experimental, so just don't use that in production yet. But this is very much on the way to becoming something that's going to be a very strong and powerful feature of ArtEngine in the years to come. So style transfer basically takes an image and then works around it and tries to imagine another image similar to it based on some references, right? So here's my input image, right? This is what my content looks like. But I'm like, okay, this is nice, but I don't like the colors. Maybe I would like this sort of color scheme a little bit better, right? So what style transfer can do is essentially imagine or sort of come up with a blend of these two images, which is not just sort of a transparency blend. It's taking one image and reimagining it as if it was done in the style of the other one, right? So the content image is this one, the one with leaves, and the style image is this one, and then you're going to see this, right? It took the color information right out of this one, and then it sort of repainted this whole one, the top image like this, right? And I can even use like more parameters to fine tune this. The only caveat here is this, that you can't put in too high resolution images in here. Like if you're going to put in something like 2K by 2K, it's not it's going to probably fail unless you have a lot of video RAM or a quad card, right? So like I said, there is reimagination of an existing image in the style of another one, right? So this is essentially the demonstration bit of this presentation. I think we have about 5 minutes for questions and answers. I can see that a lot of questions have been answered already. We have an open question that says substance sampler is easy to do this kind of work. Why should we purchase this? Yeah, Yipe, can you take this, please? Sure.
No, I was just marking it live so that you can answer it live.
Oh, okay, I'll take that. Thanks for this. Yeah, so substance sampler is obviously something that you can use. This is something a little bit different because it automates a bunch of stuff more than that. It has some features that are very useful for studios or large scale productions, like where you want to upgrade hundreds of images like this. and where you want it to be, accessible through something like a command line and things like that. And it also has, like, it's been actively developed, has a lot of support. It's platform agnostic, so you could totally use the output of this into Substance if you want. You could take this, and it's not tied to a specific software or something like that. It's standalone altogether. We have another question. Can we do this process manually? I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Andy, if you want to take over, you can. I'm just going to keep answering questions on the side. Yes, can we do this process manually? You could, but it will take, like, quite a bit of time, and that's why ArtEngine shines. If you want to do the AI calculation manually, that's essentially putting an artist to work, right? So that's something ArtEngine really helps you with when it comes to iteration times and flexibility in your creative design. You can give commands to the output. So on the right hand side, you have the tool options on the node properties window, right? That's where you can control parameters of every node to create a different result or adjust the result. Is there an ArtEngine free for students? Not at this point. We have ArtEngine available as a 30-day free trial, and after that, it's I think $19 per month. I think it's great value at that price point, but there is no students version of ArtEngine as such right now. ArtEngine for personal use is $19 per month. Mark, these just done. If you want, if like in the leaves example, you want the image to be the same but in a different orientation, yes, you should be able to do that. There are nodes for, like, rotation. There are simple transform nodes like scaling, moving, rotating, and all that. These are definitely the standard nodes that you would find in ArtEngine. Which engineering stream is the best for getting into game dev? Whichever one you like. In game dev, you're always going to find some sort of application, no matter which engineering stream you came from. You could be coming from computer science. You could be coming from software engineering.